What is up, YouTube? Jesse here, and in this video I'll be demonstrating how to build an anchor, secure yourself to that anchor, and belay your partner on a multi-pitch climb. Quick disclaimer that I am not a certified climbing instructor, and this is not hands-on instruction. Climbing can be safe, but it can also be super dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So definitely seek qualified instruction when you do this stuff for your first time. This video can be used for a refresher or maybe just to get an idea of what's going to be happening on your first multi-pitch climb, but definitely recommend having a more experienced climber work with you on these skills before you actually try them out when you're off the ground. With that said, enjoy the video. This video is going to be broken down into 3 parts. The first part is building the anchor. The second part is connecting yourself to that anchor. And the third part is belaying up your follower. And that's really all there is to it. But there are lots of little intricacies, and you'll see when you get into the video. So with that said, here we go. Here's the scenario. I've just gotten to the top of a pitch of a multi-pitch climb, and I am at a 2-bolt anchor. The techniques and ideas discussed in this video would also apply to a 3-leg anchor, which would be more common with a trad anchor, but for the purposes of this video, we're using a 2-bolt anchor. So depending on the position I'm in when I reach the anchor, I may go ahead and grab a quick draw, clip it into the anchor, and clip my rope in. If I'm on a ledge or a super stable area, I might not do that. But what this does is if I were to fall now while I'm getting the anchor and securing myself, I would just take a lead fall onto this bolt rather than the most recent bolt I clipped, which depending on the route could be a long way down if it's a super run out route. But it's important to note that I am not safe yet, I am not secure, I am still actively on belay. Now the first thing that I do is set up my anchor, and in this case I'll be using a quad anchor because it's pretty simple and straightforward, and this is what I would give to a newer climber who is leading the route. But there are an infinite way of building anchors, and I just like the quad for its simplicity. It's not very efficient, it takes a lot of gear, but it's very straightforward. And you can pre-tie the knots on the ground, so your climber doesn't have to. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just clip one end of the quad into the anchor, into one bolt, let it untwist, and then I'm going to try to clip underneath all the other hardware, just so my anchor is not cross-loaded with its carabiner. The carabiner's not over an edge or anything. And then I'll go ahead and lock up those locking carabiners, and now I have my anchor. So now let's secure myself. Right now I have a Prusik on, which is one way that you can connect to an anchor. Again, there are an infinite number of different ways you can connect to an anchor. The Prusik is one of those methods, and it's nice because it's adjustable. It's generally not what I would choose, but I'll link other options in the video description. But for this example, I'm using a Prusik, and I'm just clipping into 2 strands of the quad. Remember that if you clip all 4, the quad is no longer redundant. So now that I'm clipped in, I'm gonna go ahead and weight the anchor, and I'm gonna put all my body weight into this Prusik and make sure that none of my weight is on this rope to verify that the anchor is set up correctly and it can hold my weight. Make sure I clipped in correctly, make sure that everything's good. Once I've done that, I will yell down to my belayer, "Hey Aaron, I'm safe, you can take me off belay." And then my belayer Aaron will take me off belay. A couple things to note about that climbing command. That was the first climbing command I ever gave to my belayer. When I clipped into a quick draw, I didn't say anything. When I set up the anchor, I didn't say anything. I only let him know once I am fully safe. And I do that to avoid confusion. That way he never thinks accidentally that I said off belay, because you never want your belayer to think that you're off belay when you're not. And I also address my belayer with his name, Aaron. That way he knows that I'm speaking directly to him, and other belayers on the wall aren't confused thinking that their climber is at their anchor. But my belayer knows it's just me, and he can take me off belay. Once he's taken me off belay, he'll yell up, "Jesse, off belay," and I will go ahead and get ready to start belaying him up. So since this is not doing anything, I'll go ahead and unclip that. and I will clip my belay device to the anchor. So this is called belaying in guide mode, or sometimes referred to as belaying from above, because I'm actually belaying directly from the anchor, not from my harness. So I'll go ahead and clip my device to the anchor, and again, I clip to 2 strands of the quad, not all 4. In this case, this video, I'll be using a gree because it's pretty simple to set up in guide mode. It's basically just like your lead belaying or top rope belaying, and if I were climbing with a newer climber, I would probably try and give them a gree to belay me from above. And then I will go ahead and start pulling up rope. First, I'm gonna yell down at my belayer, "Hey Aaron, up rope," and then he's gonna yell back at me, "Up rope," just to confirm that I'm good to start pulling up the rope. Could be like he has to go grab his shoes from his bag and he's already tied into the rope, so I can't start pulling up a rope yet because it would be pulling on him, or it'd be hard for me to pull up a rope. So once he says up rope, I'll go ahead and start pulling up rope, and I will stack it on my personal anchor right here. If I'm leading the next pitch, I will start with small loops and get bigger and bigger and bigger as I go. If my partner is leading the next pitch, I'll start with big loops and then get smaller and smaller and smaller as we go. And this will just reduce the chance of the rope getting tangled up as the belayer for the next pitch is feeding out slack. So for now, we'll assume that I led the first pitch and he's gonna lead the second pitch. So I will start with big loops and then get gradually smaller and smaller as we go. And basically what this does is, if you start with small loops and then go bigger and bigger, the big loops could go underneath the small loops, and as you're feeding out slack, they would get tangled. If I was leading the next pitch, I would start with those small loops, like I said, and go bigger and bigger. That way, when Aaron gets to the anchor, I can just flip this on top, and now the big loops are on the bottom and the small loops are on top. But since Aaron is leading the next pitch, we will go smaller. You can see my rope is pretty tangled because I touched it. So that's just how my life goes. Whenever I get to Aaron at the base of the climb, Aaron is going to yell, "Jesse, that's me," and I like to drop a few feet of rope down just so that my climber knows they're not on belay yet, they're slack in the system, don't start climbing. So I'll pass down some rope, and then I will feed it into the gree. And just like when lead belay or top rope belay, the climber side goes to the climber. The brake side, or the hand side, goes to the belayer. And it's literally just the same as a lead belay or a top rope belay would be from the harness. Climber, brake. But in this case, we are attaching to the anchor. Editor Jesse here. I realized that I didn't do a great job of explaining why we like to belay off the anchor like this. This is generally referred to as belaying in guide mode or belaying from above, and it does a few things. One, for a lot of different devices, you have an assisted braking mode when belaying off of the anchor like this. With the gree, you have a assisted braking already, and you still have that assisted braking when belaying off the anchor. But the big advantage is that if my climber were to fall, they don't yank me downwards towards them. Instead, they just pull down on the anchor, and I don't get any yank at all. And what I mean when I say that it's set up just like if you were belaying in lead or top rope mode, what I really mean by that is the rope goes through the device in the same orientation, whereas with lots of other belay devices, the setup, the way that the rope goes through the device is generally slightly different. But with the gree, it's exactly the same, whether you're belaying from an anchor like this in guide mode or from your harness in lead or top rope mode. Go ahead and lock up my carabiner. And then as a last step to verify, I'll go ahead and recheck all my carabiners. Locked, 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 locked. And then I will pull on the climber side of the rope and verify that the gree actually does lock up. If you pull lightly, it might not lock up, but if you pull with some force, the gree should lock up. If it doesn't lock up, then you've probably done something wrong. Recheck your anchor, recheck your belay device. In this case, it locks up, so I'm good there. And I will go ahead and pull up the rest of my slack. And I try to keep coiling as I go. And then whenever I reach my climber, I'll feel some tension on the rope and I'll yell down, "Aaron, you're on belay, climb when ready." And then Aaron will yell up to me, "Climbing," and I'll yell, "Climb on." And from here, he'll leave the ground, start climbing, and I will continue belaying, maintaining my hand on the brake strand. The one thing you want to be careful with the gree-gree is making sure that nothing blocks this cam. So if you're on an overhanging route or an overhanging belay, you don't necessarily, this isn't usually an issue at all, but if you're on a less than vertical terrain, like a slab or something, you have to watch and make sure that this cam doesn't get blocked by the rock. So you just have to keep it oriented like this, where the cam is facing out from the wall, not bumping into anything. And you can continue taking in slack, keeping that hand on the brake strand, and then whenever your climber reaches the anchor, they will also clip in with their personal anchor to either these two strands or these two strands. It really doesn't matter as long as you're not clipping off 4. And then you're good to start passing off gear, transitioning, getting ready to lead the next pitch. Editor Jesse here again. One more important note in regards to lowering the climber in guide mode. If you're on a more difficult route, it's important to be aware that lowering in guide mode is very hard to control since you can't simply pull down on the rope to adjust lowering speed like you could if you were top rope belaying from your harness. Even with a gree-gree, it's recommended to have a backup when lowering, and I'll put a link down in the video description regarding that topic. But just be aware that lowering in guide mode is a little bit more complex than lowering in the normal top rope mode, so it's worth checking out a video on that topic to get familiar with that before belaying on a harder route where you're likely going to need to lower your climber. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you learned a lot. Again, seek qualified instruction when you do this stuff for the first time, and check out the video description for any other links to other resources. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks. Have a good one.